Hi, if you're new at drawing and you would like to be able to draw nature, just pick up your pad and pencil and go out and start drawing. It can be done simply with just lines and scribbles. So I'd like to show you how to do that, and it's just the beginning. From there you would grow more advanced, but you can get a really nice result from just lines and scribbles. So let's get started. The lines you'll be using most, or that I use most when I'm doing nature, is simple strokes starting at the bottom and coming up. And that gives the illusion of grass, and if you want thicker grass, you just add more. When you're drawing grass up close, it's large. As it goes further away from you, of course, they'll be smaller. And then smaller the further away it goes. And if it's a very distant hill, you might just be doing little tiny lines representing grass, almost like dots. Another thing that you'll be using, especially for leaves, because the tree is at a distance and you won't be drawing every leaf, you just give the suggestion of leaves. So you do smudges almost. You do lines by drawing on this, using the side of your pencil. And if it's a bush or the underside of the leaves on a tree, you're going to have more shadow underneath the clumps of leaves or underneath the sections of the bush, and then add very dark at the very bottom, especially if it's the bush. You will also be doing scribbles like this using the point of your pencil. You can do this for leaves or for bushes, or you can do a combination of these two. Of course, up towards the top of your bush or tree, it's going to be softer and not so many, and as you get down towards the bottom of a clump in a tree or the bottom of a bush, you're going to go much darker, heavier for the shadow. This is important with trees. As you draw your tree, it's going to be wider at the base and then narrower as it comes up. Same with the limbs. It's going to be wider and then narrower as it comes up. So with these simple shapes, you can do grass and bushes and leaves, and do your trees by drawing them wider at the base and thinner as they come up and out. And as you do little tiny branches, just draw a single line. When you're doing a path or water, like a stream, not a rushing river, you can just lay your pencil on its side and then use a blending stump or a Q-tip or a paper towel, and you can just smooth it and smear it. You can also smooth this, the bushes, the grass, and you can also draw with it. When your stump is dirty enough on the end, you can draw with it. If it's not dirty enough, then take a scrap piece of paper and just smear your graphite on there, and then get your blending stump nice and dirty. That's nice and dirty. And then you can draw with it. This will be drawn with a number 3 hard lead, and then later I will use a regular 2H pencil, the regular school pencil. I've lightly just put little tiny marks, almost like dots, just to kind of give a basic outline of what I'm going to be doing, and then just began the trunk and the 2 main limbs. This helps me to know ahead of time just kind of how I want it to be placed, and then with lines and scribbles I'll show you how it will be completed. This is not a well-advanced composition. I tried to just include things for lines and scribbles, just with very small lines for the distance grass. And then I'm going to put back here, I'm going to put some little tiny just scribbles. And this can be dense trees or tall bushes way off in the distance, so it's very small. It's a kind of smudge. You can find other things to smudge with. Now, laying my pencil on its side, I'm going to scribble softly over this entire bush. It's in the distance, there aren't details, you don't see the individual leaves. And if there are some stray marks sticking up and above, and not a perfectly round bush, but more organic, then it's going to look more realistic. And this is going to be the shadow side. So this side I'm going to be adding some more. The shadow under the bush. We'll have the sunlight coming from this direction. And you can use the point of your pencil as well. And allowing the paper to show through creates your light and your texture. And we'll go ahead and just keep this very small, just to show it as a hill across the back. Now this is a little closer, so it's going to be a little taller to represent this hill. So I'm going to go quite a bit taller. Another thing to remember is if you're right-handed, start on the left side of your paper, and if you're left-handed, start on the right side of your paper. That way you're not smearing as you come across. And I find in doing grass, it's best to do your strokes coming from the bottom and then go up, because as you lift up, it gets a little thinner and a little softer, and when you first start, it's such a dark line, such a dark spot you start with. And of course we're coming closer here, so we're going to get longer, taller. It's just fascinates me every time that just simple little strokes like this representing grass and hills can be so effective. We'll go ahead and start some detail on the tree. I'm just going to add shadow in this little split in the tree. I love splits and knots in a tree, and if you're doing a tree up very close, of course you would be doing the detail of the bark. And you can do some detail of the bark so that people know what it is, what kind of tree. For instance, an aspen tree would not be either shaped like this, or the texture would be different than what I'm going to do on this one. Remember, as you are doing your limbs, well, and your trunk as well, that you want your limbs and your trunk to get smaller as it goes away from the base of your tree. And it would get so skinny that it winds up to a single line. Now I'm going to add a little bit of texture. This one is a rougher bark and very light, very small lines on this side. It's only lines, but very light because this is the shine side. And you can miss patches as well. You don't have to have all of the bark in there, but more of the suggestion of it. And then when it gets to the right side of our trunk where it's shadowed, we will fill in a lot more with the lines. All the little shadow pieces in there are what adds so much interest. I love shadow and shine. This is the underside of the branch, so it'd be a little more shadowed. Now for leaves at a distance, I just do the side of my pencil and I think of the shadows that are under each clump of leaves. So I like to start like this, sort of U shapes, just to represent that clump. If you're going to do a more advanced sketch, it's nicer to have different grade pencils. Hard to very soft. Once again, this is the shadowed side, so we will be adding more shadows, but there will be some also on the shine side. And then be sure to leave some blank spaces where you see the sky showing through. Because I'm leaning in an awkward position to do this for the camera, I'm going to go ahead and finish these leaves and then come back. What I've done is continued with this, and you can see I left some holes for the sky to be showing through, and in your holes you can include branches showing through them. Make sure that they're thinner as they go up, because if you have a hole with a thick branch, it's not going to make sense. I added some more shadows, and oh yes, I made this darker up here because the leaves would be casting a shadow onto the trunk and onto the limbs. This one I used artistic license and had this very dark back here for the leaves, but kept the branch here bright showing through even though it's in the shadow, because if it was shadowed it wouldn't show up, and so I just used artistic license and left it light. There are other tools that I really like that I use. One is a kneading eraser or kneaded eraser, and it's great. You use it for just lightly lifting off if you just want to lift out some. I use it especially when drawing people. And the way you clean it is you knead it like you're kneading bread. And this is an extra soft eraser, and I use it because it doesn't ruin the tooth as badly as many other erasers. And then my favorite tool is an electric eraser. This is my favorite brand as well, Secura. But it's not necessary, it's just something that I really enjoy. And the last thing is I also use a brush, a dusting brush, and that keeps it from smearing when you go to wipe off your eraser crumbs. It doesn't smear.